Hey movers, shakers, and the stuck but curious. I'm Freya Gordon, and this is Good Shift, the podcast that helps you figure out what's next in your career and make a move with confidence. If you've ever sat with a quiet itch to pursue your passion or wondered if it's too late to start over, this conversation is your invitation that it might be possible. Today, I'm chatting with Sarah Cox, whose incredibly inspiring story really captivated me, and I know it will do the same for you. Her story is all about overcoming limiting beliefs, returning to something that she thought she'd left behind, and redefining what fulfillment in your working life can truly look like. Whether you're considering a personal or professional shift, there's some deeply valuable and relatable insights in here for you. Sarah's now a professional soccer player for Lexington SC in Kentucky, but her journey to the pitch has been anything but linear. After playing at Stanford, she stepped away from the sport and spent nearly 8 years building a standout career, working in consulting, helping launch startups, and playing a key role at a company backed by major Silicon Valley investors. But the pull of the game kept resurfacing. Eventually, she made the choice most people wouldn't dare to do at 29. She returned to professional football after almost a decade off the pitch. This episode challenges the idea that there's an expiry date on a dream. It's about trusting your instincts, having courage to pivot, and embracing the discomfort of doing something that people don't expect. Fittingly, Sarah's come straight off the pitch to chat with us today, so welcome to Good Shift, Sarah. So excited to have you on.
Freya, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Great. Well, let's jump in and talk some shift. First question I have for you, Sarah, can you give us an overview of your journey, how you went from college soccer to building a career across consulting, growth and startups before then making the leap back to sport?
Yeah, of course. I grew up in Southern California, played soccer since I could pretty much walk. My dad coached my brother's team, so I was out there from the moment that I could be. And, I played growing up. I went through the youth national team circuit, was always playing, missed a lot of school, but was, recruited and ended up playing at Stanford. And I played there for 4 years, and that was not an easy journey. College soccer is never easy, and I think it was its big time of learning for me and growth, and it was full of its challenges. And so by the end of that period, I was ready to hang up my boots. I thought, I had played, I'd done this, I had gotten that out of my system. And quite frankly, I was so burnt out from the sport. And I was like, I just needed time. And then I did not enter the college draft. And then I had a job in consulting. For Accenture. So I moved to San Francisco, was going to do that. Right before that was supposed to start, I actually got a call from an NWSL team that had a keeper who got injured. He came through an old goalkeeper coach. And the contract size was $5,000 for the season. And that included living with a host family. And so at the time I couldn't support myself doing that. And I already had a job in consulting. So I decided to forego that. And I hadn't played in a couple months. And at the time, not having played for 6 months and having to re-enter preseason seemed like this insurmountable challenge that I didn't even want to bother doing, which is funny now that, I did it 8 years later. But at the time I was like, no way. So I went and worked. I worked in consulting for about a year and then moved to Los Angeles and started working at a VC called Science there. And while I was there, I did a lot of work with all the other startups that they incubated. So I kind of got to learn a little bit of everything, as well as starting my own growth agency. From there, I ended up going to a startup in New York where I was the first employee. So again, I got to really grow there. I stayed for 4 years. And at the end of that, it was time for me to try something new, right? I really wanted to figure out what industry I wanted to be in and kind of understand, that this next step needed to be a good step up as well as in the right area of my career. It felt like a very important decision. And kind of subsequently at the time, I had been coaching for the local soccer club in New York. And that was something that kind of fell into my lap. And I had seen all these little kids out there and I kind of missed it. And I wanted to volunteer and kind of work with the young girls and goalkeeper. So I had been doing that. So that was kind of the first time I touched a soccer ball again in like 8 years. And so that kind of, started lighting the fire a little bit. And I was like, okay, maybe I do want to work in sports. Maybe I do want to work in soccer. And at this time I had a lot of conversations with different mentors that I had, and everyone's advice was just take the time, really, really understand what you want to get out of this next step. Really understand like what your values are and, how you can be in the right path. And so I did do a lot of like thinking and whatever. And I came to the point like, yes, I want to work in soccer. And then I started looking at roles specifically, and a lot of the roles were held by ex professional players. And then I kind of started going down this path of like, okay, is it that, I want to work in soccer, or is it like that thing inside me that I never got to fulfill? Like, do I want to play? Like, is that kind of that secret kernel that's been like growing inside of me? And at this time, like I didn't tell anyone about it. I was like, no, that's like kind of crazy. Like, what that's obviously something I'm just gonna have to live with forever. Like, I made the decision not to play. Like, that's my path. And then fast forward, I was sitting at the US Open tennis tournament in New York with my husband, and it'd been a long day. We'd seen a lot. I had a few of I forget what they're called, the drinks there with the little melon balls, and we're sitting there watching a doubles team play, and the 2 women, it was a 35 and a 37-year-old, and they were, like, kicking the shit out of this young team, and I was like, "God, that's so cool." Like, look at them. Like, they're in their late 30s, and they're still getting to do the sport that they absolutely love. And my husband kinda looked at me being like, "I mean, you could do that if you want." Like, and I hadn't even told him yet that I was maybe thinking about playing, and that kind of had, been planted in the back of my mind.
Obviously, giving off the energy.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of was like, yeah, maybe, and then we started talking about it. And I think that the moment that I started vocalizing that, maybe I do want to play, or, maybe this is, I'd always preface it with like, maybe this is crazy, or, I probably couldn't do it, but maybe I should try it. Or like, maybe I should call up that coach, have that one session. And then I did that. And then I called up my old goalkeeper coach, and he picked up the phone kind of laughing, being like, oh, well, like, yo, are you gonna make a comeback? Like, haven't heard from you in 15 years. I was like, yeah, kind of. Like, could I? And I set up that first session with him. And then from there, it, you know, 10 minutes in, he's like, oh shit, like, you could do this, like, I think you really could try. So, why not go for it?
So, one of the things I want to dig into is why did you call your old coach first as your first port of call? Was that because you thought he might be the person to support you, or that was just the best starting point?
So he actually wasn't my first call. I skipped ahead a little bit. So I actually had called. I have a couple friends that, are still playing in the NWSL in that league. And I have other friends who had played and then are retired. And so that felt like kind of the safer avenue to talk to them first. So I called up a couple of my friends and was like, hey, like, like, you think I could do it? Like, you've done it, you've been there, you're out of it now. Like, is this crazy? Should I do it? And all of them were just so excited. They're like, oh my God, I would go back. Like, I want to play, but I'm, in business school, or one of my friends is pregnant. And she's like, that's so cool. If you have the opportunity to do that and you think you can, like, screw it. Like, just go for it, try it. And so I think once I, got a little bit of that validation outside of my husband, someone who's going to probably like hype me up, regardless of the truth of it. So once I did that, I think my like logical brain turned on. And so then like, the first step is like, okay, I need someone in that field of experience to tell me like, yes, you can do this, or yes, like, you're physically capable of doing it. And so, yeah. And so I called my goalkeeper coach and was just like, set up one session. I was like, 10 minutes, like, give me 10 minutes and tell me like if I can do it, or, if not, at least I tried. And at that point, like, I'll step away and be like, okay, that was like a little crazy, or, no, like, I think I can do this.
And at that point, did you have to train before you went to do that 10 minutes with your old coach? Because I assume you weren't quite in the peak of your physical fitness like you were before if you'd been working office jobs and things. So how did you get to that point? Or was it just you can tell your skill set's still there and the fitness can come afterwards?
So it's actually kind of funny. Now, looking back, I realize I was seeking this competition, or kind of seeking what I get out of soccer in so many other areas of my life. I had started playing, just through the city rec thing. We were living in Manhattan Beach at the time, beach volleyball. And I started getting like super competitive about it, and was thinking like, oh, like, should I, start entering some tournaments here, some of the semi-pro ones? And I really was super into that. I had started doing some sprint triathlons. I did my first one and I got kind of that like competitive endorphins back. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. So I signed up for like 4 more, which I never did because I started training soccer. So I had kind of been seeking it out in these different avenues, but I was in good shape. I was used, my reaction had started to come back. So I was doing beach volleyball. I had kind of gotten used to diving again, physically again, like I'd been swimming, running, biking. But I think I had also started thinking a little bit about goalkeeping again because I had done that coaching when I was in New York. So I had, within the last 2 years, kind of reminded myself of sort of the foundations of what's needed there. But no, I literally had pumped up a ball that I found in our garage and went out with my husband and had him, who he does not play soccer. He bought a pair of cleats, but he tried to, just kick me a ball a couple times. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I can catch it. Like it's fine. Like, I'll figure it out. And so yeah, and so I set up that goalkeeping session with the coach pretty much as soon as I could because I knew like if I would, took too much time, I might convince myself out of it. But I think I gave myself like 3 days before we got back from that trip in New York before I set it up.
That's super impressive, and that resonates what you're saying. You didn't want to give yourself time to go back on what you'd been thinking about. How long from the time when you decided after you'd been taking some space that, okay, I think that soccer's something I want to get back into, to actually getting back into it, did that take?
So I had left my startup job right after 4th of July. And so I had spent most of July and August thinking about what I want to do career wise. And I hadn't come to the decision yet that I wanted to play soccer. I think that was more like, I think that was like the very first weekend in September, actually. And so I had really taken 2 full months of not knowing what that final, answer would be, but really just thinking about what I wanted to get out of this next step. And I think because I had taken the time and because I had put it in the work into, that kind of deep thinking about myself and um, what I really valued and what I wanted to get out of my life, out of my career, that when I had kind of come to this decision to play soccer, it was really easy to just do it, right? Like I decided I want to do it and it can really just fit everything that I had been sort of soul searching for the 2 months prior. And it just felt right. And I think that's sort of one of the things about this whole journey was that it's been hard, of course. Like physically, it's been challenging. Like there's been mental, emotionally, like there've been moments where it's hard, but in general, it has been easy. Like it wasn't that hard to get back into it. It wasn't, things just kind of fell into place for me. And I think that along the way, it kind of was constantly reassuring, like, okay, I am on the right path. I am doing the right thing. Like, whether or not it actually was easy, it felt easy because I had made the right decision, I guess, for the right reasons.
And I think that's something that I notice being a recurring theme with people that I talk to. It's these internal signs that you can feel when something's wrong, if you're feeling stuck in a job or you're not liking your job, but you can also really feel when something's right. And that momentum then gives you, your brain, the positive reinforcement to keep going forward. So I guess I would love to know what made you leave your startup job and then take those 2 months to really figure out what was right. Did you have an inkling? And you, was it physical signs, burnout, or was it more mental?
Yeah. So I started at the startup as the first employee. So I had, done a little bit of everything. And at the time in my career, I loved that. And then I grew more in like the product and operation side of the company. And I had hit a point where my growth there was kind of just stagnant. And I think that the roles that I would have liked to be in were not the roles that I was going to get promoted into. And so that was, so yeah, I think that was mostly it. I realized that my growth there wasn't going to happen. And I just felt stagnant. I wasn't that excited to do what I was doing. I felt like I've been doing the same thing kind of over and over again. And I didn't feel that same passion for the job that I had, when I very first started there.
And what other options were you considering when you stopped to do that? Or do you think that when you had stopped to do that, you did have the soccer or going back to sports? I know you mentioned whether that would be in a coaching capacity or something different within the sport in your mind at the time.
Yeah. I took a look at, kind of the larger sports environment. And I wanted to still like apply a lot of the work that I had built in my career up until that point. And I just knew that I wanted to shift it more into like sports. And then once I got there, I knew kind of I wanted to be in the soccer world specifically. So then I was looking more on the business side of teams and seeing, which roles I think made sense, like either on the operation side of teams or like, something that would eventually lead to being like the COO or the GM of a team and kind of understanding like talking to a lot of people, understanding what that career path could look like. The more that I sort of immersed myself into the soccer world, trying to understand what that career path looked like, was when I realized, I think I might actually want to be one of those people down on the field, not the one sitting up here in the box, right? At least for right now. And I think, yeah, it was absolutely the right decision for me.
So a lot of people as well talk about that space being really important. And I heard you say that it gave you the time to really connect in with yourself and think about what you wanted to do. Can you talk us through your perspective on if people have the ability to take some time between things? They know they've sort of, whether it's burnt out or they're feeling stagnant in their current job, and the benefits of doing that and how it was really valuable to you, as opposed to if you had maybe just taken the leap and thought, this isn't quite the right startup environment that I'm in, but I could transfer these skills and be in a different startup environment.
Yeah, I mean, I recognize that I was very privileged in that I could take that time. I think that there's, of course, people who can't, right? And they need to immediately get that, next paycheck or go to whenever your severance ends or, whatever it is. But I think if you can, it is really helpful because it's when you're in that headspace where you're feeling stagnant or you're frustrated or you're feeling just content with where you are, I think it's so hard to then understand, what else it is that you actually need. And when you don't have a job, I think, of course, there's that internal pressure of like, oh shit, like I need to get going, I need to find a job. So I think there's a little bit of that motivation that's there. And I think there's a little bit of a forcing function for you to actually sit down and really like take that time to have those like that deep thought without, a normal 9 to 5, like filling up your inbox every day or your phone constantly pinging with like, all the stuff that comes up with work. And I think for me too, it gave me that time to think about like who the right people were that I needed to talk to. And I had reached out to the founder of my previous company. I had chatted with her. She's like a mentor to me as well as a few other, people that I knew. And again, like all of their it's funny because most of their advice really was like, no one can tell you, like, of course they can make introductions, people can help, people can, help you get from point A to point B. But it really was just came down to me having to take the time and do, kind of the uncomfortable work of sitting with yourself, of sitting in silence, of just thinking, maybe I'm going down this path, but like, could it be a different one or should it be a different one? Or, really testing your gut with like what feels right, what doesn't, versus, just saying like, okay, like I think I want to work in soccer. There's a job opening. Let me apply to like 15 jobs. And that's not to say I didn't do that too, though. Like while I was doing this, I was applying to jobs because, of course, I have my parents calling me, my husband, like, what'd you do today? Like, of course I want to say I applied to some jobs and I did some interviews that, they're I had a lot of conversations. Like I talked to a skincare company, I talked to a financial company. I did these steps, but it kind of just reinforced that none of that was right for me. So I do think you can still, explore one path while you're doing that thinking and, doing that kind of deeper personal work. But I think, again, it's just important to remember like if it doesn't feel right or if it feels like you're just forcing this next thing because you feel like you have to, then to take a step back and think about it.
That's so well said and so well explained. I think it'll give people a lot of confidence to take that time and sit and be uncomfortable as well. Did you set a time limit on yourself when you left your startup as to when you wanted to have chosen the next thing? Or were you happy to just let it roll and you knew it would come?
Yeah, in my head, I kind of had this timeline of like by the end of the summer. And I think part of that too was like it's the summer, like why not? Like this is a great time. Like have the afternoon off. I would do that in beach, go down to the beach. Yeah, play volleyball. Um, but so it's a pretty generous, like give yourself the summer. But yeah, I had like a rough, some like kind of rough bookends of like when I wanted to do it. And but I always have I don't know, maybe it's just like my own self-confidence, but I always kind of like, oh, I'll figure it out. Like I knew I would get there. I was never stressed that, I wouldn't get a job eventually or I wouldn't figure it out. So I always knew like if, it went too long, if, I didn't quite get exactly what I wanted, like, I could get a job in the meantime, right? Like, I could always figure something out as a stepping stone, but I wanted that was kind of my fallback, I guess, is like, I don't know if I ever would have really, like, just taken some jobs that, like, I knew I didn't wanna do, but in my head, I was like, "Oh, I can always do this if I need to," and I think that that helped me in a way.
Yeah, it's just sort of that safety blanket as you're going forward, knowing that you can always get a job back in corporate or startups if you need to. So you were 29 when you made this leap, at an age that most people think the door is closed for professional sports, especially ones that require a lot of athleticism like soccer. How did you face that internal doubt? Can you talk us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, maybe I should have had more internal doubt, but, like, I didn't. I was kinda like
I love that.
I think I've always had this, like, chip on my shoulder because I never actually played. I didn't play very much when I was at Stanford. There was, like, a goalkeeper that came in a year after me that came in and had the starting spot, and so I always kind of I was in my first week of preseason, the head coach called me in and told me that he didn't need a goalkeeper my year, and he just recruited me so I wouldn't go to one of the other schools I was looking at. And so that kinda set the tone. So I kinda knew, like, I wasn't really gonna play all that much, but I always felt like I should have been, of course, right? Like, as I think anyone who's ever been in that position does. Um, and so then when I left, anytime I watched a soccer game, like, I almost didn't enjoy it because I was like, "Hey, like, I could be out there, like, hey, I could do that." And so I think I always kind of carried that chip on my shoulder. So when I decided to do it, it was more of like, yeah, I've been saying that for so long, like, I now have to prove it. And like, this is my chance to actually, prove that to myself. And I think that that was actually like one of, the biggest things for me in all of this is that I have made this decision to do it for myself and, for no one else. Growing up playing soccer or kind of anything, right? Like you're doing it for your parents. And then in college, you're doing it for a scholarship or for a coach or, whatever. And of course, you're always kind of doing it for yourself, but there's other people involved. Whereas this time, it's like I made this decision to do it for me and that's it. And like one day, if I wake up tomorrow, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't have to. Like I can stop whenever I want. And there's sort of this like amazing freedom in that. And so I kind of went on a tangent there, but back to your point, yeah, I just like physically, I just like always knew that like I could. And so I was just there to prove it.
No, I like that you went on that tangent because that's something when we had our pre-chat that stood out to me that you said now you're playing 100% for yourself and it feels really different. And I think that's such a powerful thing to be able to impart to people that when you really choose where you are, so many of us, I think, can end up getting pushed down a certain career path whether our parents want us to do law or be a doctor and that can be fulfilling somewhat, but then if you can actually find something that you 100% want to be doing for yourself, like it must be an amazing feeling. How does it feel to be back out on the pitch playing now?
Yeah, I mean, the first couple games, it was a very wild feeling. But it feels great. It just feels right. It feels like I'm doing exactly what I should be doing. And like I said, I'm doing it for myself, but kind of this really special thing is I feel like I've also given this gift to other people in my life by doing this and by, following my passion and doing, this thing that seemed like this kind of crazy idea when I first told people. I feel like I've heard some other friends be like, what you did was so cool. Like, I kind of want to do X. I'm kind of thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, yeah, go for it. Like, why not? I did this. You could do that. And I think I've been able to sort of, my parents like loved and supported me playing soccer forever. And I've been able to sort of give this gift back to them too, of being able to watch me after, kind of see the fruit of all of their labor and their heartache for all of the years that I played soccer as well. Um, and yeah, it's just been really cool to see the impact that I've had on, my family and just different people and friends around me.
Yeah, I was so excited when our mutual friend Tina, who put you on to me, mentioned your story. Like, I was really captivated by that. And I just think that out of all the career pivots that people can do, this is such a powerful one because going back into professional sport is something that there is so many limiting beliefs around for people in sport and for people out there watching it. And for you to be able to do that, I think gives people so much confidence that in something else that doesn't even require the physical ability to, they can definitely do it. Like if you can go out and do this, as you say, then other people can go out and chase their dreams as well. A question that I have for you, was there any embarrassment or self-doubt about saying your dream aloud again when it came to the fore? Because you mentioned that you'd sort of been thinking about it and you haven't even really mentioned it to your husband at this point, and then you sort of had some funny feelings, and you were saying it in a way that was a bit protective of yourself, I guess, like, this is a bit crazy, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was absolutely embarrassed. Like that first call I had to my friends that had played professional soccer, I was so scared for no reason, mind you, but I was so scared to tell them. So I was like, oh my God, are they just going to laugh at me? Like, is this crazy idea that I have actually crazy? But again, they were like so excited and so supportive. But really the scariest one was telling my parents. Like I did not tell them. I think I started the beginning of September. I think I had done like 4 or 5 training sessions with a goalkeeper coach because although he said like, "Oh, yeah, I think you can do this," like, I myself wasn't convinced yet. I kinda needed to see, like, how I would progress from sessions 1 to 5, as well as getting in sort of a team setting. So, I had found a semi-pro team in the area to play with, and they were in, I was living in Manhattan Beach, like I said, my parents were in, Newport Beach in Orange County, and that's where and the semi-pro team was. So, I would go down to beat traffic and kind of, like, linger at their house while they were at work, and then go to the training session and then come back, and I think I had gotten away with it once, and then the next day I needed to go, I knew they would be there, and so I was there kinda sitting around, and they were like, "So, like, why are you here? It's, like, a Tuesday, like, do you have a job yet? Like, what's going on?" And I kinda was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm here, I'm gonna go play with this like soccer team. And I just kind of rambled and it all fell out that I had been training and were like, I wanted to do this. And at first they were just like, that was not what we expected you to say. We thought you were here to like see your nephews or something, right? But they were, I think, like hesitantly supportive, I would say. I think they're kind of like, oh, that's a little crazy, but like go for it, like go, whatever, go do it for a bit. But like, let's like be realistic and let's see how this goes. Um, and, from then they were they came out to, like, all of my goalkeeper sessions that they could, and they've been, like, so supportive and, so, so excited by this whole journey, but there really was, like, a lot of embarrassment that I just placed on myself for no reason, and it was just, like, again, like you said, it feels like this huge thing to just, say I wanna be a professional athlete, like, who just says that? Like, that's crazy, right? But, like, that was where my
rugby,
mind
obviously.
that's, like, where my mind was, and, uh, I think I just had to take enough steps where I got to the point where I proved to myself, like, that I could do this, and I feel like at that point when I stopped talking about it as kind of this, like, fun fact of what I'm doing with my, free time while I don't have a job, into something that's, actually, like, a part of my identity, and, I am a professional soccer player, I'm doing everything I can to become one as opposed to, like, yeah, I'm just, like, trying to play soccer on the side and sort of see how it goes.
Yeah, how important do you think it was for you to fully commit when you got back into that rather than see how it goes?
Yeah, I think this is the most important thing that I did. Once I decided, I took like a couple weeks. I would say like when I say couple, I think it actually in reality is probably like 2 weeks of like figuring it out. I would take the ball out on my own and kind of just do all the steps that I needed to do mentally to like make the decision. And then once I made that final decision, it was like go time. So it was like, how many times can I realistically do goalkeeper session? Because I'm paying for it, right? I don't have a job. Like, how many times can I realistically do that? Okay, great. I'm gonna go to a physical therapist, have her create a reentry program for me for lifting and, work on all the stability that I need to do, having not played sport for so long. And I really just created a very rigid structure for myself of these are the steps I need to take, this is what I need to do every week. And I just started reaching out to old coaches, setting up even coffee chats with them and just trying to understand, okay, where are my connections right now? And it was pretty cool to see, like, I actually that's part of what just made this feel right, like, I have a ton of connections in soccer, whether it's coaches, players that I know, and all of them, were willing to text someone, reach out for me. Everyone was so excited by all of this that, you know, my my community, my people, like, really stepped up and helped me as well. But I think it's if I just kind of, half-assed it and was like, "Well, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that," I think, I'd still be I'd probably have a job and I'd just be playing on a semi-pro team for fun. I wouldn't actually be, doing this as my career.
Yeah, and I think that's an important takeaway for people, that you were quite structured around it. It didn't just come and fall in your lap. There's a lot you did. You went out and you talked to people, you met up with as many people as you can, you pulled on your networks, you set up like a proper structure for yourself and things like that. Is there anything else you would add to people as advice for setting up a structure for themselves to find the next thing or to give whatever they're about to do a really good go?
Yeah, I think it's just talk to people who have successfully done what you want to do, right? And find out, okay, what did they do? How did they start? Or even now that they're doing it, what does their day look like? Because that was something that I really wanted to emulate of, okay, I'd be on a professional team. This is what my days would look like. So how can I create that as closely as possible in my day to day now? And I think it even like then helped in the transition happen when I went from doing it on my own to, doing it with a team. Um, but I think, yeah, just as much as you can talk to people and understand and, don't just be sitting at home. Like, let's say you want to have a startup. Don't just sit at home on your laptop, where you have all your distractions. Like, leave your house, go to a coffee shop, go to a WeWork, whatever it is, and like create that 9 to 5 office like structure that you would like to have. And I think that it's kind of manifesting, right? Like, manifest like what you want your day to look like and, what you want to get out of each day and do it.
For sure. And for people who don't have any perspective on manifesting or don't really know what that is, do you have, like, what's your perspective on what that is?
I wasn't a big manifester, I think, until this. I wasn't doing anything that I was like, I need to manifest that, right? Like there wasn't any like big kind of thing that I wanted out that seemed so sort of outside of what my norm was. But I think it's just, like I said, seeing the version of yourself that you want or, the version of, your life or whatever. And I guess I think about it a little differently, but it's like maybe more logical approach to manifesting, but seeing what I want and then understanding, okay, like what are little steps that I can take to get to that point? It's kind of just goal setting in the way I look at it. I know some people are much more into like their 5 minute journal and manifesting whatever, but I guess it's more goal setting is how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it
Yeah.
and understand it, which is why I was interested on your perspective. So, what would you say to someone who has been quietly sitting on a dream but thinks or has been told that it's too late?
I would say, who told you it's too late? Like, you're alive, right? Do it. I think if you've been sitting on something and it's just like always been like tugging at your gut. I mean, I sat on the idea that I wanted to play soccer for 8 years, right? And it wasn't until I had kind of these different defining moments in my life that sort of brought out that need. And I think it's okay. Like, if you feel something and you don't feel that it's ready or you doesn't feel quite right yet, I think it's okay to shelf it, and like let that sit for a little bit. But the moment that it does start to feel right, or the moment that you find yourself thinking about it again and again, it's like, okay, I think that's your sign. I think you do it and figure out what like the easiest first step is. And maybe it's like calling someone and just verbalizing it. Like, I think that's important. It's just anyone, it can be literally anyone. Say it out loud. The more you say it out loud, the more friends you say it to, the more that it helps it feel real.
I love that answer, and I loved exactly what you said at the start. You summed it up really well. Who told you it was too late? Sometimes I think we can get into thinking certain things because of societal norms and things, but people like you are out there breaking them, and it's just so epic. What were some of the biggest mental hurdles, I guess you could call them, limiting beliefs or anything that you had when you were going back into competitive sport? And that might be around the financials. I know that you told me when we were chatting before, like, you could have made a big excuse for yourself that the time wasn't necessarily right. You got married recently, paid for a wedding, and what else was in there? And can you unpack that for us a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's always financially scary to not have a job, right? Especially if you want to dump your money into something like, for me, it's training costs money, physical therapy costs money. But I feel very lucky that, like I said, I just got married, we spent money on a wedding. However, my husband was very supportive of this. And we basically just sat down and figured out, okay, like we can spend this much money a month on this. So let's figure out a structure and things that we can make it work. And, I reached out to old trainers. I got free gym space. I, did what I could to like make it as economical as, we could. that was for sure a limiting belief, but like you can figure it out, right? Like there's always a way to figure it out. And it's, might be challenging, but you can. And you just have to, again, it comes down to just that commitment. Like if you're fully in, like you will figure it out. And you have to trust that like you're gonna do it. I think there's also just that embarrassment that takes place like inside of your own head that I think the easiest way to sort of chip away at that is to just keep saying it and to keep verbalizing what you want to do. Because every time you say it, I can guarantee you someone, for one person that might kind of like laugh or scoff at it or whatever, there's going to be 10 more that are supportive and excited for you. And I think it's just learning to kind of like ignore the people that like, give it that little scoff and really embracing the people that are supportive. And it's just that it's just building up the own belief in yourself to just do it. And at some point, like you can talk about it, you can think about it, but like you just have to commit and you just got to go.
I like that you're talking about how to build up the confidence as well. Not everyone has that confidence right away, but there's so many ways to do that and getting positive reinforcement from people. Did you talk to anyone that really made you feel shitty about the decision or say something quite negative, or was it all relatively positive?
It was all relatively positive, but I think that's probably because becoming like a professional athlete playing sports like exciting to people, right? Like people love that. Like it's a very it's just kind of like an easy win. Yeah, like people want to see you do that and they want to see it. Whereas like I think if I was like I'm going to dump all my money in this one idea, the startup, people, if people don't agree with the idea or think it's good or whatever, like you're going to have a lot more naysayers. Whereas everyone thinks playing a sport for your job is cool for the most part. Like maybe my parents were a little hesitant because they're like going to be more protective, but everyone else, yeah, everyone else was like, yeah, go for it. Because for them, it's kind of cool, and they don't hear that every day.
How do you think being older and more experienced actually helped your approach than it would in your 20s? Like, how have you taken this to go forward and have more success in soccer now than when you were younger?
I think I am such a better player and teammate now than I was in college and as than I would have been right out of college. I think especially my position is very mental, and I think you have to be able to have the stability and like the perspective sort of outside of soccer for that to translate onto the field. And I think that if I had been doing this, 8 years ago, I probably would have carried a lot of that, like stress and trauma and everything that I had had from my 4 years playing in college into the game. Whereas now I've been away from it. I had the years and the coaching and the little things that I did to sort of relearn my love for the sport and sort of find my passion again and find it in a way that, was for myself, like I had said. And so I think that, yeah, I just think that doing it now, like, I love being like the oldest person on the team. Like, I love being able to sort of help the other girls, whether it's on or off the field, and sort of feel like I have this like perspective that's a little greater beyond soccer, right? Like I think it's hard when you're playing a sport right after school, like it feels like it's your everything because it kind of is. Like you don't have that many life experiences outside of it. Whereas now, like I feel like I've lived this kind of whole little life and now I'm doing this. And it just lets me, be grateful and appreciate every day that I'm able to come out, wake up, make the decision for myself that I want to be here and I want to do this. And I think that just doing anything from that mental standpoint is just so much easier than if you feel, kind of forced into a corner.
Yeah, and I think it's really amazing that you can come back with that perspective. As you said, you're more worldly in a way, and I imagine that when things go wrong or maybe you miss a goal, it's potentially easier to work through those things and have a bit more perspective on that. And I know in sport, like from my limited experience with sports, absolutely not professional, but that those things do feel like the end of the world on the day and for potentially days after. But do you think that your coping ability is better?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm able to keep a much like more level head in the game. Again, like I'm able to wake up and have the perspective of like, all right, I mean, like in all honesty, I had like a couple weeks ago had like a horrible, horrible game. Like it was probably my worst game yet. And I again was able to wake up. I rewatched it and which is something I would never have done like 8 years ago. I just been like, nah, I don't want to see that. Like that was horrible. But woke up, and rewatched and was like, okay, wait, it actually wasn't that bad, right? Like I had a couple bad moments, but like I also had some good things, right? Like, and I was able to sort of learn from it and see, both sides of it. Whereas I think before the negative would have been all I saw, right? And I think that that's actually been like a really important thing for me, just sports wise. It's just like having the perspective of like, yes, this is my job, but like it's a job, right? Like it's not my life. And so like I can come home and like I'm done. I show up, I put it on the field, I can like leave it there, leave it in the locker room, come home and like move on with sort of whatever my life is that day.
And can you chat us through your move a little bit? Because I know that you were in Manhattan Beach and then you moved to Kentucky to play for the team, and how long you've been playing for now.
I started training again, like I said, in September of 2023. So then I trained for about like 6 months ish. And then I actually, again, this kind of comes back to like doing the right thing, the right time. Like all the pieces sort of fell into place for me. This is the first year of the league that I'm playing in, the USL Super League. So it's the inaugural season. So there were 8 new teams coming. And US Soccer has given us like the same Division sort of 1 status as the current league, which is the NWSL. And of course, knowing it's a new league, like it would be easier to get on a team here and get on a team that I could actually play for and like affect. And so I knew there were 8 new teams coming in, but I didn't know this before I even made the decision to try. So I think it was just kind of like a blessing along the way. And then I had heard that the Lexington team was having a combine out in California. So I was like, all right, like I'll just go show up. Like this will be good practice, if anything, like kind of see what like the competition looks like a little bit. So I showed up and the head coach at the time was my youth national team coach from 15 years ago. So I showed up and he was talking. I was like, Liz, crazy. I know him. Yeah. And then he said his name and I was like, oh my gosh, like I remember that name. And so before I kind of went up to him and he was like looking at me too. And he was like, wait, he's like, I coached you. And then we sort of put it together. And then I played well at the combine and they had called me and said they wanted to see me come out. So I came out, flew out to Lexington with my husband, which was also sort of an important moment for us to be like, okay, like, could we live here? Like, could this be our life? Because he was going to move here as well. He works remote. So he, fortunately is able to. And came out, really, liked it, liked the club, loved the vision that the club had, sort of what their, values were around building the women's team and sort of the youth system that they had started. And they were building like a beautiful brand new stadium just for the club. I loved everything I saw. So then I went home, signed with the team, and then the season started last July. So we moved here a couple weeks early in June. And then, yeah, been here since July. We had a mid-season break, so went home for the holidays and then came back the end of January. And then the season goes until the end of May is regular season, and playoffs are the first 2 weeks of June. So then you have a bit of an off season, and then it all starts again in July. Um, but yeah, like I said, I love it. It's been like an amazing almost year for me, but it's pretty wild to think back, to the September prior that like it's only been like a year and a half ish of playing when I took 8 years off.
And what do you think the most surprising, good or bad thing has been since moving to Kentucky and getting back into the sport?
So this was actually before moving. The most surprising thing was how hard it was to focus for 90 minutes. So in the first couple games I was playing with the semi-pro team, uh, I like 20 minutes in, my brain is just like completely somewhere else. And I would keep having to remind myself. And it's just so, I think, unique now to have to focus on one thing for 90 plus minutes. And that was one of the hardest things to do, was to train my brain. And that was kind of actually like a very shocking thing, was like how difficult that actually was. But since moving to Kentucky, honestly, again, like I think we just been surprised how much we like it. Like I grew up in California, my husband grew up in New York, like coastal kids. Like I purposefully did not want to leave California, so I only looked at California schools for college. But again, we didn't really know what to expect, but like we really love Lexington. It's like a very cool little city. It's fun. UK, I didn't know UK was here. It's in downtown Lexington. Big like horse country, bourbon. It's surrounded by beautiful horse farms. Like we really like it. However, no one told us about the weather, and that I don't know what I thought, but I did not realize it snowed and how cold it was here. And so it was like a proper winter. It was cold.
So, in terms of going forward, a lot of people believe that there is a expiry on professional sport, and I'm sure there is to a degree. But how does that sit with you? Is this something that you're just going to wait and see how it goes, or do you have a plan around that?
Yeah, I think like, as a woman, like my natural, expiration date is like I do want to have kids. So like eventually, I will have to think about that. But people do come back after it. That's not like a limiting factor necessarily. And maybe that's a limiting belief that like the next one that I need to get past, that like it is possible. You can have a kid, you can come return to play. But I think for me it's just take it season by season. And like I said, like I have the benefit of the moment that this isn't serving me anymore, or the moment that I truly don't want to be doing this anymore, I don't have to. And, it could be in 2 seasons, it could be in 3, it could be in 8. I don't know. And of course, there is some physical limiting factors there. It probably will not be 8 seasons, but
I mean, you've already proved wrong a lot of what people think. And how do you think this shift has changed your perspective on what success and fulfillment looks like? Because I'm sure you felt when you were in the startup world and everything for a while that things were going really well. And that's probably the absolute peak of where a lot of people want to get to in their careers. But how has that changed for you now?
yeah, I think that I thought that, success, or I think coming out of Stanford too, like it's very, innovation, entrepreneur, like human centered design thinking, like everything's kind of felt, especially the classes that I took, like really pushed me in that way. And I kind of thought, that, I success is like having my own startup, like running, or even just like being the CEO, running my own company. Like I also graduated in this kind of like millennial girl boss era where like, I listened to all the podcasts, like I love my girl Brene Brown, like I did, all of the things. And I think I took me a while to realize that, like, that wasn't success for me, and, like, although, of course, like, I could do those things, I don't actually want to be a startup founder. I don't have, like, some burning idea, at least at the time, that, like, I felt like needed to happen to change the world or, whatever it was. So I think I needed to get past what I thought, success would be given, my where I went to school, the career path I had had. And again, it kind of just came down to that like thinking that I did about what I want to do for myself. And I think I did a lot of thinking about like kind of my personal values and what success would look like for me. And yeah, and I think that's sort of what then sort of that thinking and what led me down the path of like making this particular shift of just listening to my gut of like what feels right for me versus like what, is sort of like societal success.
Did you feel like you had a loss of identity at all walking away from the VC startup world?
A little bit. I think I just didn't know if I should be, I had put in all this time to this like particular path, if I should be looking maybe at like a VC or startup that's like sports focused or like roughly about sports. I think that once I understood that like my drive for that was because like I always had this like itch to play, it then has actually kind of like laid my path, like, very, like, beautifully in front of me. Like, I think that because I'd done that, like, now, I wanna play for however many years I wanna play, and then I wanna go into the business side of it, and I think that having had the perspective as a player will, really benefit me in the future, and I think that actually, all of those steps that I had taken working in, VC startups, playing, is actually gonna lay the perfect foundation for ultimately where I wanna go.
Yeah, I love that. So it's not the end of a chapter. That's just been the building blocks to get where you're going to go in the future. And did you have an identity loss when you stopped playing soccer after Stanford and you moved into the VC startup world?
A little bit. I think that it did help that, I moved to San Francisco where like a lot of Stanford kids all just kind of flock. And it was kind of like a continuation of college a bit. But at that point, I was pretty over soccer. Like I was very burnt out and I had spent like most of my senior year taking a lot of like entrepreneurship, product design classes. So I think I had kind of gotten myself excited to be in sort of that world as well. Um, but it was actually, I think, a little bit later on when I realized uh, that I missed playing soccer to the point where like I didn't really even enjoy watching soccer games because it just kind of like burned this hole inside of me of like I don't know, it was like anger, but like frustration, but like I kind of wanted to watch. Like it was like this weird feeling I always had when I, would watch games. And I think that that was sort of what I had to work through.
I just find it so fascinating that you were doing soccer at Stanford and then you obviously had some sort of burnout and then it just kept ticking away at you and you've managed to find your way back there. Like, it's just such a cool story. It really gets me excited. What advice would you give to someone who's doing fine or potentially great in their career, but they wonder if they're meant for something else?
I would say take the time and talk to people about it. I think the more you can like verbalize that and, find someone who could, is doing something that you think is really cool or like, we all hear of that friend or someone who says they're doing something and you kind of get that feeling like, oh, I'm kind of jealous. Like that's cool, right? And I think talk to those people, ask them, how they got to do what they're doing. And I think like even if you're happy with what you're doing, if you're always having that feeling of oh, like what that person's doing so cool, what that person's doing is so cool. Then maybe, there is something else that your gut, like, I think what it is. And like, that there's something else you should be doing. And yeah, if things are fine, that's fine. But like, I don't know. I just think you have to make the choice that like, whether you're okay with like stagnation, like, are you happy just being content in what you're doing? Or are you going to listen to that part of you that says, there's something more?
Yeah, life is short. Go out and get it.
Yeah.
And that's what this podcast is really all about. If you're having those feelings, take steps to pursue them. They don't have to be dramatic steps, but just getting interested, talking to people, doing all the things, taking a bit of time if you can. So let's go into a few quick fire questions. What is a belief that you hold now that you didn't hold 5 years ago?
Authenticity lasts forever. I think if what you're doing is authentic to yourself, then if it works out, great. If not, then it's just one step along your path, but at least it's going to guide you in the right direction.
That's hard hitting. I like it. Is there a book or podcast that has particularly shifted your thinking?
So it would be this one, I think. However, at the time when I was doing all this, like I kind of was out of my like podcast. I was listening to The Daily and that's about it. And like true crime podcasts. But like I said, I like went through that like girl boss era where like I read all the books, I listened to all the podcasts. How I built this was like I would go on a run every day and listen to that. And I love those. And like sometimes I'll still think back to some of those episodes. But again, like I think I gained the most inspiration from just real conversations that I had with mentors, with people in my circle, and just taking the time to understand what I wanted for myself.
That's really great advice. Thank you. It keeps coming back to the people. And I think in your journey, you've been surrounded by so many good people, whether that's your husband or your parents and these ex-pro players and your coaches. So I think if people are thinking about that, then something to really focus on is who are the right people in your life that are going to support you to get to where you want to be. So what is something that you're curious about right now, either on or off the field?
I touched on it a little bit, but I think it's just understanding soccer as a business from a player's perspective. I think, at Stanford, I said I did all those like human-centered design, like I did product designing, prototyped. I did all the things. And I think that it's actually interesting because now I'm kind of, my own future customer in a way. And I think it's just been like so enlightening. Like you keep notes of things that I come across that I think about like as a player, you just see a totally different side of how a soccer business is run. And and I think that every single day, it's just cool to know that I'm learning something that's just going to keep building on itself for my future.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see where you go with this, both in your career on the pitch and then off the pitch. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
31. I turned 31 in February.
And you got back into professional soccer when you were 29, is that right? Or is that when you
29? Yeah, 29. And then I turned, 30 in, I turned 30 like right before I got here. And so technically, I guess I was 30 when I had started playing.
That's epic. And you've still got so much more time ahead of you. It's funny to think when you're at the age of 30, you can feel like there's been so much behind you, but realistically, your career has only been about 10 years. And, if you're lucky and things go well in your life, then you should have 40 more years or something of your career, depending on how long you want to work. So it's really cool that you have stepped into what is fulfilling for you. And I really admire that. One last question from me. If you could leave the listeners with one key takeaway from everything we've talked about today, or maybe something else that hasn't come up, what would it be?
I would say just do it. Like, again, like kind of back to the authenticity thing. Like, if it feels right to you, just do it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I think it's always helpful to just take a step back. Like, things feel so big when you're in them, right? And it feels like this huge, like hill to climb. And, you just procrastinate. But it's like, why? Right? Like, life's short. Like, just take a step back, figure out what the smallest, most practical thing that you can do is. And like I said, maybe that's just saying it out loud. Great. Do that. Now say it to 10 more people. And then now, people are going to ask you what's next. And now, do whatever that thing is and take it one baby step at a time. But the longer you think about it, the longer it's going to eat away at you. If it feels right, I just think you got to do it and follow your gut.
I love that. And that's a message that keeps being reinforced by people who have gone ahead and made a career pivot. Just do it. So get out there, people, just do it. It can be small steps, as Sarah says, but just starting to make that change. Sarah, what I love about this story is that you have just shown that the impossible potentially is possible, that you can go and do something extraordinary. You don't have to have started out in that, and you can make multiple pivots to get to where you want to be. I love that this isn't the end of your story. It's somewhat just the beginning by getting back into soccer, and you have dreams that go beyond that. I'm so excited to see what you do, and thank you so much for your time to come on. I'm really grateful every time people take the time, and I know that it's important to you, as you've said on here, to empower other people to make shifts and go after their dreams. So really appreciate it. And I do want to ask, where can people find you and see what you're up to and follow along?
You can watch all of our games on Peacock, USL. All of our games are there. But yeah, you can follow along on my Instagram. It's Sarah Cox Duplessis. But yeah. No, thank you so much. This was so fun. I mean, I love talking about it, and I hope that just hearing my story will help people get past that, first initial embarrassment or the fear of like failure or whatever it is, and just take that first step and try it, because, you have nothing to lose.
There's been so many nuggets in here. Thank you, Sarah. And I think this is definitely one that people will be saving down and re-listening to. All of the friends who I've already told about that I'm chatting to you have been so excited. So I'm really excited to get this live.
Yeah, thank you so much.